Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Politics Relaxed. It's all over. Liz Truss is gone, and we're back where we were 3 months ago. Liz Truss is out of the picture. Yet more conservative psychodrama. Yet more excitement, but also yet more delay. Welcome, and let's get straight into it. What is going on? Is how I'd start it off. I don't know how we even start.
Well, what I'd have to say, okay, I think that this is actually not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. And sorry, I know you both think a bit shocked, but let me explain a little bit. Because the truth is that Liz Truss is going to go down as merely a brief footnote in the history of the Conservative Party and British politics. So she lasted, 45 days? Fine, okay, job done. Move on. The truth is she chose to stray away from the manifesto, and Conservative MPs, they managed to rightly force her resignation, which I describe as squarely a constitutional correction. Now we have another leadership contest. The important thing for me is that whoever the next leader is moves back towards that 2019 manifesto. I think all of the three frontrunners at the moment have a lot of great attributes, and I'd be happy to have our party unite around any one of them. But me, myself, of course, I probably don't need to divulge too much into this, but I'll be backing Rishi Sunak.
It's rather embarrassing, isn't it, for the Conservative Party? Finley, what do you think?
I think embarrassing would be putting it as an understatement, frankly. I think Liz Truss has been probably one of the worst disasters in recent memory for the Conservative Party. I think I wouldn't personally call it as a surprise. I think she was very open with the public and the Conservative Party electorate about what she was going to do. And the fact that, people didn't listen to the points that Rishi Sunak was making about the economy and instead kind of divulging into that fantasy kind of means that that's how we've got here. I think it's becoming increasingly hard to defend the Conservative Party day by day. And that's speaking as a member, which I think speaks volumes about the situation that we're in.
Yeah.
I've got doubts about, because I know that a lot of people are now calling for a general election. I think I've got doubts personally about whether we should have one. I think obviously if it was to happen, it would be political suicide for the Conservatives. I mean, I've seen polls where we're level right now with the Liberal Democrats, for example, and that's just something that doesn't happen out of the ordinary. It's just, I mean, it's hard to describe it at the moment. And I think that speaks volumes about where we are.
Yeah. Well, Finley, I think you'd be more on par with the Liberals and Lloyd George than the Liberal Democrats if we were to hold a general election right about now. But I'll just approach it from a bit more of an outsider perspective, and I can imagine that blank space is playing on repeat at Truss's house right now. I'll just say that it's not a surprise. Her position was practically untenable. I think if you looked at it from the surface, you might be a bit shocked as if after PMQs, things seem to be kind of going okay for Truss, but realistically, she had no purpose being there. Not to quote Keir Starmer, but there was no reason why she still had to be there. Her chancellor was out, her ideological soulmate was out. All her plans, the mandate that she'd been elected on by 0.2% of the population was out. So Trussonomics was practically dead, and she was more kind of a shadow figure. And we all knew that Jeremy Hunt was the one that was pulling the strings. So I'm not that surprised. I think holding a general election would be the right move. I think that the Conservatives are just dreaming now. There's no point prolonging your defeat. It's a slow death if you do it this way. If you try and carry on with a new leader, which by the way is just not going to work, Sunak won't win a general election. He might get on par with the SNPs and with your win with Sunak. I don't think it's a probable scenario. I think holding a general election is the right move. And I think it's what the public want. The Conservatives have no credibility, and a leadership election is just not a right move. We had one for a couple months, and we ended up with a prime minister that lasted shorter than the election. So yeah.
I would just say that I think that all these calls from Labour for a general election, I mean, they're just simply a result of 12 years of despair and anguish on the Labour benches, and now, of course, it boils over and they want a general election because they think they can win. But the truth is, it would be extremely irresponsible for us to hold a general election at the moment. We know that we've got severe economic turmoil. What we need right now is a good leader and a good government, which I think we will get once this contest is over, to steer us through that economic crisis and to fulfil the 5-year term that this government was elected to fulfil in 2019. And that goes back to my point before, delivering the manifesto of 2019. That has to be the key mission for the next government. And any general election would simply be a distraction from that.
I think while it's nice to say that it's just 12 years of Labour being frustrated that they don't win elections, trust me, I'm very frustrated that we don't win elections. But it's not that, it's the fact that we're going to have another kind of government that, one, it hasn't been elected to be there. I mean, it was a Boris Johnson mandate, it was a Boris Johnson manifesto. We didn't see that delivered by Liz Truss. How do we know that we're going to see it delivered by the next one? I mean, it's going to be what, the second place of the Conservatives. We think that the second place Conservative person is going to be any better than the first place Conservative person that we got in Liz Truss. It's going to be yet more chaos. And it's interesting that you say, oh, we don't have time for a general election. Yet we had time in summer for months and months of Conservative psychodrama. When's this going to stop? The Conservative psychodrama is not going to stop, because whoever you get in the next leadership race, if it's Rishi Sunak, there's going to be loads of MPs unhappy. If it's Boris Johnson, there's going to be loads of MPs unhappy. There is going to be discontent. There's going to be splits in the Conservative Party that's going to further stop the next Prime Minister getting anything done. The only real answer right now for people who are facing low energy bills is a Labour government, a stable government, a government that knows what they're doing, and a government with policy.
Well, I'll just
to say to that, I would say right now that the game's changed dramatically since the summer. I think Liz Truss's announcement of the mini budget kind of put a huge spanner in the works in terms of economic turmoil. While I think from a logical sense, it would be right to hold a general election, I think in the practical sense about all stopping, making government slow down, parliament slow down as a result of calling general election and campaigning. I mean, I see reservations with that. I kind of want us to all unite together in the sense that we can all work together to kind of solve the mess created by Liz Truss. And I mean, I think that my opinion of that will change about who gets in to become the leader of the Conservative Party. I probably agree with Cameron in the sense that I do want Rishi Sunak to come in, because I see him as kind of an economically responsible figure. But I think I'm in two minds over this. I think obviously there's the point that, you know, there's 12 years of the Tory government and it's clearly not working at this stage. I think at least the public should be involved to an extent, I think.
But what you don't have in the Conservative Party is a good centrist candidate, and we think that we've seen how factionalized the Conservatives have become over this past couple of months, with the right and the left tearing each other apart. Sunak, while I agree with Cameron and Finlay, would be the most appropriate candidate. I think we should just skip the election because we know what the outcome is going to be. He's not supported by the left of the party, and I think if we really want to see kind of if you really want to minimize the damage done up until the general election, if it's not held now, if it's held in 2024, you need a good centrist candidate who can pull all the factionalized party together again. And I don't see from the selection that we have, Badenoch, Braverman, I don't even know why she's up again, Penny Mordaunt, I don't see quite, unless you can point it out to me, I don't see one that could bring the party together.
I'd also just quote what I think it was along these lines, what Keir Starmer said at PMQs, which was, why would you trust the arsonist to put out the fire? You can't trust this Conservative Party to solve the issues that they've created. It was only weeks ago when you had MPs and members that were supporting Liz Truss and Liz Truss's dangerous tax cutting plan, which we saw enacted in the mini budget. And now we're like, oh, we need to get someone to unite around to solve the mini budget. This is a mini budget from the Conservatives. So how can we get the Conservatives to solve it? There's only one person that's going to solve it, and it's going to be Keir Starmer.
No, the person to solve it is going to be whoever wins this leadership election. And I'm supporting Rishi Sunak, but it depends on who it is, because the Conservative Party was elected in 2019 to a 5-year term to deliver on a manifesto that was extremely promising and extremely popular in the country. The Liz Truss situation was, I think, a consequence of her being demonstrably unconservative in her actions. We know that the three candidates to be our new leader are all conservative figures. They are all pragmatic. They all know how to intervene if necessary, particularly Rishi Sunak, who, as I've said, I'm backing. You just have to look back into the COVID pandemic to see his successes in pragmatically intervening in the economy to help save jobs and livelihoods. He did an excellent job then, and he'll do an excellent job now if he wins.
I think I'll just go back to what I think it was Danielle was saying about unity in the Conservative Party. While I do think that the Conservative Party have been fragmented since about the 2019 election with the expulsion of those kind of more left-wing MPs in the party, I think at the moment you need unity from everyone. I think, and a general election, what's that going to do? It's going to pit two sides against each other, where you have, you know, people on the right and people on the left kind of squabbling heads saying like, you know, I want to get in and that, and you just can't have that right now. I don't think there is like a wave the magic wand type of situation that will kind of just make it go away. We need to be, I think, pragmatic in the sense of, you know, accept the position that we're in and kind of work together. Maybe more of the Conservative Party reaching out to Labour to kind of work together on legislation. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen in the sense of where we are, but it's what I'd like to see happen.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that definitely there needs to be more cross-party work being done, especially with the kind of chaos that's been created and the fact that people are not going to be able to afford heating and eating. And I think that's an important thing to mention, the fact that we still have this fuel crisis, and yet we're seeing this Tory psychodrama roll on and roll on and roll on, and there's still going to be division within the Conservatives, and I just don't see how we get away from that. Whatever happens as a result of this leadership, you'll have exactly what we have with Liz Truss. There'll be this kind of pretend getting around one candidate, when in reality you'll have, whether it be if it's Rishi Sunak, you'll have a group of ERG MPs that are extremely unhappy with the direction he's moving in, or if it's Boris Johnson, you've got at least a dozen of them that are saying they're going to rescind the whip and they're not even going to become part of the Conservative Party. You're going to have a complete factional war, and that's what we're going to. I just don't see how we get away from that. That's the key issue that has to be discussed, is how do we get away from Conservative infighting, because that is what is stopping our country. And that's the reason, because the reason Liz Truss even got in the first place was because a big faction of the ERG went and backed her. So then she went to this kind of libertarian right-wing perspective, which completely didn't work, crashed the economy, crashed the pound. And now we're going to have the exact same thing, because we're just going to have more Conservative infighting. I just don't see how it ends.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't really, because the issue isn't that the mud's not sticking to the wall; it's that there's a wrong type of mud being thrown at it. And I think that the issue is, I think we've had so many recycled ministers. I think we've kind of underestimated. Yeah, exactly. We've had so many recycled ministers. I think it's just time for the Conservative Party to become a party of opposition. And I think we've kind of underestimated how difficult the job of a prime minister is. Yeah. And there's just, if we're being realistic, there's just no one in this current Conservative Party who can take us through.
Yeah.
There's no one in Labour who can fulfil that role. The Conservative Party is and will always be the party of government. Labour, we do talk a lot about infighting. I mean, let's look a little bit of Labour infighting over the last few years, and that will continue, including if they win the next general election, because they're not going to unite around a leader who has limited ideas. He doesn't have a drawn-out perspective, and I don't see that will be a long-lasting arrangement. The Conservative Party is a party of pragmatists. You're right to say that there has been some infighting recently. There has been some factions within the party, and the truth is that there are some MPs, largely the more extreme ones, of which there are not that many, by the way, a very limited fraction of the majority of the party, who are not acting responsibly and who need to grow up. But I think that as they are such a small minority, under the next leader, I do think the Conservative Party will be able to unite and will be able to effectively govern.
I have to come back on that first point, because if you look at what Keir Starmer's proposing, there are some very clear policy outlines that have already been set out. And again, we're probably 2 years away from a general election. We already have some ideas of what Labour are going to do when they come into power. We got GB Energy, we got the cut to VAT on home energy bills. All of this is completely funded. You can get it on the Labour Party website. We got policy for mental health. We got policy for education. There's going to be breakfast clubs in every single school. There's going to be a careers advisor in every single school. We have serious policy. We have policy that's completely funded, and we have a man that's serious, a person that's not going to deal with. They've already dealt with the factional infighting within the Labour Party. Look at the latest conference. There was no disunity, and then we look at the Conservative Party conference where it was arguments between Grant Shapps, Michael Gove, and Liz Truss. Again, you haven't suggested how this is going to end, but instead we have a serious guy who knows what he's doing, who's dedicated to public service. Look, I don't agree with everything that Keir Starmer's done, for sure, but he is the right man. Compared to anybody that the Conservative is putting forward, he's the right man to lead this country. Anything?
I think what I'd say to that is whether he's the right man for the job right now, which I've kind of got reservations on, because if you look at the past couple of years, I think Keir Starmer has had his profile boosted through the Conservatives' missteps and failures. He's been given the largest open goal that any political opposition leader has seen, and the question of whether he's converted that goal, I think we'll say yes now for sure. But I think he's kind of dissented opposition with his own party as a result of what Boris Johnson and Liz Truss has done. I think to say that, he has had a history of dropping pledges and then readopting them, renationalizing energy, for example. He's put it in his manifesto in 2020, he dropped it, and then he put it back in again. I mean, that's not in comparison to what Liz Truss or Boris Johnson has done, but it's just an example of where I'm kind of concerned about him. I think from the leadership aspect, he's great. I think he's incredibly a person that is very professional, he's very politician-like. We've not seen that for a long, long, long time. And it comes back to the idea of whether I'm in two minds right now. I think if you compare him to someone like Rishi Sunak, they're both saying that they'll be economically responsible with the economy. And I think it's gonna take a few more weeks for me to kind of really get my head around what I want to believe. And it's just all gone wrong.
I mean, let's remember, Labour always say they're going to be different, don't they? During the Blair Brown years, and what happened? They left government with the chief secretary to the Treasury leaving a note saying, "Sorry, there's no money." So, I mean, for sure, Labour can try all they want to rebuild an image of, but it will never serve for longevity. That's the truth of it, because the Conservative Party is the party of fiscal responsibility.
After we come out of the 45-day prime ministership of Liz Truss, the shortest prime minister we've ever had, I don't think the word longevity can be used about the Conservative Party ever again. Neither can economic responsibility or anything like that can be used around the Conservatives again until they rebuild trust, and they have to rebuild trust, like Labour have done. Labour have rebuilt trust in the economy, and now we're seeing people think that Labour are serious about the economy. And I like how we've turned this discussion from the Conservatives to Labour when we've got this dumpster fire of Conservative leadership races raging on. I think there is a clear alternative, and that alternative has to come into government.
It's classic Conservative kind of deflection. And this is something that they often do to kind of mitigate their issues. They're like, well, yes, we're bad, but Labour's even worse. But in actuality, it's a pretty lame, to want a better word, it's a pretty lame excuse. And I think Keir Starmer has proved that they would. And I do, take Finley's points on board about him not being the most convicted of politicians. But I would counteract that by saying he was rather responding to public mood rather than, abandoning his policies. And I do think this is a time for a Labour government. He said he wants a greener, what's the manifesto, Felix? A greener future. I think this is a time for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
look, I think I'll just say in response to that, I'm always concerned by my confidence in an opposition leader who's responding to kind of this despotic populist ruler can always kind of be a bit mystified a bit. I think you saw this with Joe Biden in the 2020 election. He drew up a lot of support as a way of acting as an anti-Donald Trump vote. And my perception is right now that I think while you can take some confidence in Keir Starmer's economic policy to an extent, I believe he's seen more as an anti-Tory vote rather than a pro-Labour vote. I think, for example, you see a lot of these safe blue seats looking as if they're going to switch to Labour right now. And what's that as a result of? That's a result of the Conservative policy, the Conservative Party's failure. It's not due to anything that I think goes on with how the Labour Party conduct themselves. I mean, sure, they've picked themselves up, I think, from where they were since the Corbyn days. There's no doubt about that. But I think when you talk about like deflection in a way, we're talking about Labour because we're almost expecting them to come into office soon, and we need to have conversations about how they'll do.
Yeah, I'd agree that we need to have conversations about what Labour are doing. But again, you've got to remember how much can you do in opposition. I mean, it was only 3 days ago when Liz Truss was asking Keir Starmer why he hadn't done this or that, even though he's in opposition. There's only so much you can do. And the fact that Labour have built up from where they were to where they are now, I mean, I'd accept a lot of it is anti-Tory vote, but we need to take that anti-Tory vote, and if we win in 2 years' time, then we can start to show people why a Labour government is going to be, we need it for 5 years, for 10 years, and maybe even longer than that. And that's what we have to do once we're in office. But we have got clear plans, I think, and we have got serious, credible opposition now, and that's what I'm very happy about, and I'm very confident about when we go into the election, whether it be in 2 years' time or hopefully even sooner than that.
Yeah, but also just to build on what you said, Finlay, I don't really see the issue in being an anti-Tory vote, because that's what tends to happen when there's vast economic crisis. Just like we saw it at the end of Brown's premiership, you could argue that Cameron won because he was an anti-Labour vote. That tends to happen when there's huge apathy amongst the electorate.
We'll see what happens in the next few months, and we'll be keeping up to date with it. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and obviously subscribe, and anywhere else. Because we've been putting out lots of great content about what Liz Truss has been doing, and we will continue to do so. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you to you for watching. Stick around for the next one. Cheers. Bye.